Good morning, excellent morning, wonderful afternoon, and fantastic evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and I am really honored to have Ingolf Wunder with me again, who is a world-renowned pianist, the wonderful Kimi Alford, who is a wonderful NLP lady, not guy, lady. And Jeanne is here taking over for when I need to get the work done. And of course, you know her because she's here all the time. Having said that, we are talking about our core values. Anyway, Jeannie will tell you about that. And I am going to get my YouTube channel for everyone here. So the link so you guys can easily find me. Go ahead, Jeanne.
Well, today we're going to talk about checking your core beliefs. And it's important as we start the new year that we pay attention to what do we really believe. And so today's quote, I want to start with a motivational speaker and trainer, Randy Gage. And I found this one specifically for my friend Kimi. He said, the next time your core beliefs are challenged, try being curious instead of furious, which is something Kimi says regularly. So I was like, I have to share that one. I follow that with Marianne Rodmaker. She's an artist and a professional speaker, and she talks a lot about creativity. And she writes, belief transcends ritual, structure, and societal expectations. It is enlivening, intensely personal core to our being, our way of being. So if you're looking for a powerful definition of core beliefs, I thought that was a good one. And then the best one comes from somebody I'm sure everybody's heard of, and that's the great American philosopher, Muhammad Ali, who writes, it is the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. So today we're going to talk about checking your core beliefs. And I'm glad we have somebody who's probably one of the leading creative minds in the world, a virtuoso pianist who shares his music with everybody, and a great therapist and NLP practitioner that can help us break down what it means to have core beliefs. Because I believe strongly that we're not always aware of those core beliefs, and trying to uncover them might be the greatest project that we have in our adult lives. Kimi?
Thank you. And this topic is so very important because our beliefs operate our system, our life. Our beliefs infiltrate everything. You imagine a string of grapes, and you've got each grape is a belief, something you think is true about your life or the world. And then there's the stem right in the center of that. That is your core belief. That is the base of all your beliefs. And those beliefs can be so ingrained that they feel like they're the truth. But a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. You may not know where you picked it up, but you can change it. And that's so powerful because when you can change something, then you can create something that you actually would prefer than what's going on if you aren't liking what's happening.
It's a strong motivator. And as I said, sometimes we're not aware of them, of what those beliefs are, but it's such a strong motivator that we need to be aware, so that if we want to make change, we have to go to the very foundation of our beliefs. Oftentimes when I read about core beliefs, the first one I read about that's probably the most prevalent out there is, I'm not good enough. And I really would like all of us to change that, because we are just simply, we are. We're who we are, we show up, and no matter what our beliefs, that's who we are. So Ingolf, as a great creative mind, you must have gone through some struggles at some point, with becoming the artist that you are.
Well, I mean, it's a really tough question, as everything on MindPlore. That's why I like minds to be plored. It's as you said. I mean, everything is a thought. Everything is to change, and here we have to be aware that of the conscious and subconscious mind. If most of the things, when I'm talking about music, I use this example. Most of the things that you hear in music or that you work on in music happens in the subconscious mind, which you can, after the first 7 years of programming, let's say, you can only change it by repetition and by, let's say, by being aware that your mind takes in much more than your conscious mind, which means almost everything, and everything stays in your brain. So I think this helped me a lot. Once I realized that, I used techniques in order to become aware of what the core, so the core belief, like we talked today, what the core is of a certain thing that makes me do this or makes me do that. And then I apply techniques, and that's with every piece I play or with everything I do is a different technique, obviously, but I apply a technique in order to change my behavior so that my subconscious can be changed. And I think this is the key word here is awareness. You have to become aware of which thoughts are changing your emotional state, and which thought, what is it exactly that makes you tick, And I think this is a hard thing to do, and again, it's awareness. So, and I think it's a journey, and you have to everybody has to find that out for himself, and at some point there comes the aha moment where you think, okay, if I change this, then all of a sudden I'll have that outcome, and it will do this, and all of a sudden it comes together, and still you will do a lot of mistakes, as we always do. We are humans, but then you can correct these mistakes.
That's true. That's true. And awareness is probably one of the hardest steps, though, because I don't believe, okay, I'm not going to use that word because I want to change my core beliefs. I know in my case, somebody kept telling me, a teacher I was working with kept saying, you need to look at what you're thinking. And I kept looking at her like, what do you mean? Literally, it was a concept I could not grab. Thankfully, that was 30 years ago, and I worked through it, because I have a constant conversation going in my head. And so what I became aware of is that half those thoughts that are in my head, and I call them voices, please don't tell my doctor so they don't, bring up schizophrenia, but they're thoughts, but they're certain types of thoughts. So I started naming them. Like one of them I named after a great American comedian who's full of snarkiness. I'll say that word again, snarkiness. I have a snark voice, and I named him David Letterman because that was his kind of comedy. And one that I finally named my dad, because that was the kind of challenges that he would say. And the one that comes up with, who do you think you are? That's my dad. And when I started to think about those stories, then I was like, oh, I heard that when I was younger. That was Dad's story that I'm holding on to. And then I could look at it more objectively and say, oh, Dad was telling me that I wasn't good enough to do something, and he was trying to protect me. So I'm trying to rewrite those stories. That's the process that I fell into that seems to work. As parents, and I know I tried to be sensitive as I was raising my son, but as parents, we say things that kids pick up. And, if you say something like, that is stupid to a 5-year-old, he hears, I'm stupid. So I was trying really hard to be aware of that and to teach my son to hear the difference between those words. But we remember as children, and we carry that deep into our adult world before we're even cognizant of the power of those words. Kimi, you're saying.
So imagine you're a fish in a fishbowl. You're in this water, and you look around and you see the world, and the water is your world. Those are your beliefs. They are so obvious to you. They feel like the truth. They feel like that's the only way they are. So until you hear somebody like Ingolf or Carla or you or anybody talk about beliefs, you might not even consider that that is not the truth. You can choose, when you know this, to believe something differently. However, Muhammad Ali had that quote about affirmations. The thing about affirmations is, if they are aligned with your beliefs, they'll feel pretty good. It'll feel obvious. If they are not aligned with your beliefs, I'm a great writer, for instance, and you don't feel like a great writer because you had a teacher tell you you weren't a good writer, or in my case, my father would edit my writing, and I used to write long flowing sentences, and my dad would chop them down, and he would, they should be bullet pointed. Well, I interpreted that to mean I wasn't a good writer. It is only in having to write for class and reading my own writing over time that I realized I am a good writer. And there was another piece that came in that was fundamental for me in this particular case. I started studying about differences between masculine and feminine dynamics. The masculine is this provider, protector, producer energy, and it's single focused. They like bullet points. The feminine is the supporter, adapter, enhancer, and it's multi-focused. We can go on tangents like nobody's business. And when we go on those tangents, that makes sense to us. A group of women can get together and we go on all kinds of tangents, and it feels satiating, it feels nourishing, it makes us happy. And a man can come into those conversations and just be like, whoa, there's just too much going on, too many different tangents. So back to my writing. I had believed through the behavior of my father with my writing that I was not a good writer. And now I believe I am. I've got evidence to support that. And I understand that he was coming from this masculine mode and I was coming from the feminine mode. Neither one of them is right or wrong, but in illuminating that, it gave me more confidence and I was able to change that belief. And other beliefs are so ingrained in you, not to mean they can't be changed, but they're so ingrained in you that it takes somebody outside of you to look and see what's going on for you and look for that stem. Remember that grape, sort of group of grapes? Look for that core belief. And then all the other pieces start to fall into place when that belief is changed. And that's one of the things I do with my clients about men and women, or about their abilities to get a job or be creative or whatever it is they want to do. I look for those core beliefs to help them transform their lives. Because a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. It's not the truth. And when you change your beliefs, the affirmation will feel, of course I'm a good writer. It'll feel obvious to you. What is it that you want to believe that would be, that if it was obvious to you, it would feel really good to you? What is it? You can change it.
That's such a good point, because at the end of the day, everything is a feeling. Like, even if you have a rational thought, then the last thing that switches from 0 to 1 is a feeling. And the other thing is that was triggered now when you it's great what you said, because belief is not the truth. Then it makes me think, what is the truth, obviously, and that goes directly into the thought that we have to become aware that each one of us is living in a reality that is basically made up by the brain itself and by your brain. So basically everybody is constantly lying to to oneself, which is sounds maybe bad, but isn't, because this means you can change it. And another thing that triggered as well is like, it's very, for example, it's very important when you play music, it's very important to record yourself, for example, or to have somebody, an outside let's say entity, listening to you and telling you what's actually the truth, or at least one truth. In other words, it means whatever you train to do and what you believe you are sounding like is not the actual thing, because you will sound every time different. You will sound different in a different hall. You will sound different every day. And so I think if you're a performer, for example, the most important thing is to realize what kind of processes are happening within you that create the outcome that you can't really hear. But you then imagine it so well that at some point it becomes one, and you know, okay, if I change this, it's most probably going to change that, and I will do this to reach this, and so on. And this is basically with everything like this, that if you have to double check each belief, whether if it's true, or at least in what we agree to be true. And I think these are the things that one has to become aware of.
Seems like a lot of work.
Well,
Because
okay.
if you weren't working at it, you could walk through in a somnambulent state, kind of sleepwalking through life.
Yeah.
You know,
But
Which is more work? Which is more work? Having a life where you're struggling and frustrated and things aren't working. I mean, my clients come to me when things aren't working the way they want them to. If somebody's life is working and they are happy with it, they're not my clients. The people who want to change their experience and aren't liking what's happening, those are my clients. And those people look at their lives and say, this isn't working. I'm not happy with the outcome that I'm getting.
I'm just really glad that I could throw out that non sequitur, and you guys actually answered what I really wanted you to say, that it's worth the work. Carla, you were going to say something?
Well, I want to go back a few steps, because when you opened up the show, you made a very important point. You wanted everyone to begin to know their core beliefs, or to live by their core beliefs. And I think one way of doing that is by checking out your emotions. When you check out your emotions, something very interesting happens. If you begin to believe something that you don't like, what happens? You begin to feel very tight inside and very unhappy. But if you're believing something that makes you happy, then you become more creative and more capable of moving forward. So I think good old Abraham Hicks taught me this. So I think it's really important for us to begin looking at our emotions and deciding from how that makes us feel to move us forward.
Yeah, a lot of times people have responded to me when I said I just don't feel it, or they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, my stomach is saying, be careful. And I know in various incidents throughout my life, when my stomach says, ugh, I know I need to listen to it, because it usually keeps me out of danger. Like something bad's going to happen and I need to make a different decision. So that's intuition that I didn't recognize as a kid, but it kept me out of trouble. And so I think that's what you're referring to, is understanding what your body tells you just as much as what your mind tells you.
And our minds are very tricky. They're like jumping monkeys all the time. And we go from the positive to the negative as quickly as we can. It's like two sides of the coin. We're rolling that coin, and one time we get heads up, and that's the positive. And then well, did that really happen? And we throw the coin again and it gets negative, and we're, oh, you know what? I shouldn't believe that. And it takes a long time, because we have been taught in our lives not to trust what makes us happy, not to believe what makes us happy will move us forward. So I think it's time that we begin looking at what makes us happy and focus on that more than the negative. And I'm really good at focusing on the negative, but I've been flipping it recently to focus on the positive, focus on what makes me happy more than what the world appears to say to us. Kimi?
We have about 950 trillion bits of information coming into our brains every single day, give or take a few. That's an enormous amount of information. And that I calculated that maybe 10 years ago. Can you imagine what's happening with our smartphones and our computers, and like chronic just barrage of information? Out of all that information, there's some good and some bad. Some you would describe like, yeah, I like that. Some you say, oh my God, that's awful. And our perception is such that our focus will be based on what we intend to focus on. If we're conscious about it, we can focus on all the terrible things going on in the world, for instance. The news outlets often do that. And we watch that and we think the world is not a safe place. Or we can change our perception. So this is the negative stuff is in the foreground, and the positive stuff we can't even see because we are not looking for it, because we don't believe that it's there. However, it is. When you consciously and intentionally change your focus to this positive stuff, that can become the foreground. And then you begin to see the beauty in the world. What's true? They're both there. We can find evidence that supports the world as a dangerous place or the world is a safe place. We can find evidence for either one. What's going on in our own heads is, as Ingolf said, it creates our feelings, our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our actions. What's going on in our own head is our perception of what's going on out here. And what's going on out here is colored by our perception. I call that stuck in your own head syndrome. CEOs for short. SIYOHS. Stuck in your own head syndrome. We all suffer from it. We like to think, and we tend to think, that our perception is the right way, the only way the world is, or the only way my life is. But in here, we can change our perception and bring those positive things to the foreground that will give us hope and possibility and enthusiasm for life. If you look at the news, I wouldn't blame you if you thought that was the only reality and thought you had to get out of here. And I don't think that that's the best use of your time. I believe that each and every person on the planet is here for a purpose. I believe that to the core of my being. And when my clients spend time with me, they start to believe that. Is it true? I don't know. Is it useful for me to believe that? Absolutely. And I choose to focus on that. And then guess what? I see the beauty and the possibilities, and I look for the purpose in each person. That's the world I want to live in. What world do you want to live in?
Excellent.
I remember.
There's a point where I believe you need to be aware. So news has a purpose, but I like to keep it in perspective. So, I want to be aware, but I want to bring up what you've talked about with choosing. And that's what Stephen Covey and others have said. Between the stimulus and the response, you get to choose. And I like to add to that in the illustration when I'm speaking, you get to choose heaven, which is peace and love and joy, or hell, which is chaos and calamity and whatever. So you get to choose. But the important part in there is I think we have to recognize that sometimes there's some things we judge as negative from our own perspectives, but might be lessons. And that's one of the things that I used with my son when he'd get into trouble. You do the consequences, you have the talks, and then when things calm down, I would say something like, did you learn anything from this? What can you tell me was a lesson? That way it wasn't lost. If there was something like, I ran into the street and a car came and I was like, yeah, and what could have happened if I didn't grab you? So even when he was really little, I tried to look at those lessons. What I missed in my own adult life was applying the same logic. It's so much easier to fix other people's problems and not your own, so
That's
much
right.
easier because you see it with a 360 view. With yourself, you only see 180.
That's right.
Ingolf,
That's right.
you had something?
Well, what triggered here is the perception. Isn't the perception based on your core beliefs?
Right.
Like this is it. I mean, and your core beliefs is basically everything your brain has ever taken in, and especially in the first years. So that's why it's so important. The first 7 or 8 or 9 years, you're like, in the theta brain waves, and you're just taking everything in. And
Now they
this
say
is
5.
Oh, only 5. I thought 7. Okay, but yeah. Anyway, it's even more important than what happens there. But after that, you can still change it, of course, but it's getting harder. So, and I think it's the awareness of the awareness of your core beliefs is so important, because that decides what you perceive. It's like this example. I believe it was. I don't know if it was Dr. Joe Dispenza or Bruce Lipton. I don't know. He was saying about when Columbus was sailing to America, the indigenous people didn't see the ships on the horizon because they were not aware of the concept of a ship. So they just saw that thing when it was very close, and then it was too late. And this is exactly it. And you know, our reality is just a tiny percent of the bandwidth of all the, you know, visual of, how do you say, of all the what's the English word for that? If so we perceive only a tiny bandwidth of all the visual things that are in the world. So, and within this, you choose what's your reality. That's why I would switch off the television immediately if I were you. I mean, all of you listeners, because it's so bad. Because you should be in charge of what you listen to, what you perceive, and this is directly connected to the core beliefs.
Yes, Carla?
Thank you. And the world, I mean, we perceive the world based on our own minds. And people, I remember when I was a teenager, and I was dreaming of peace, and I said that to my dad, and my dad said, "You're only dreaming, there's no reality behind it." And I know that he didn't mean anything negative about it at the time, but it shifted my belief system. Okay, maybe I should be looking at the world and what the world looks like now. But the truth is, what the world looks like now may not actually be in my world. I'm not starting wars. I am not affected with COVID. I'm not saying that I shouldn't be compassionate to those people dealing with that. We need to know that it's there. We need to be there to help. But at the same time, how we think and what goes through our minds is what creates the world around us. And what do we want to create? Do we want to create all kinds of negativity? Or do we want to create a positive, peaceful world? And we can create it, we create it in our minds and nowhere else.
Yes. And one of the things that I've become acutely aware of is we have a tendency to make things complex. I think it's easier for us to think that we're these complex creatures that nobody can understand. And in reality, we're simply beings. We're here simply to love each other. And when you start to look at that, and you start to look, if somebody were to ask me to, challenge me to defend that, I would go, because I don't know how to do it. But I will say an example is, I grew up and I got a little chunky, probably around 10 or 11, which is normal in the growth spurt, as I've noticed from the kids that I've seen grow up in the last 30 years. But I started hearing things like, "What happened? She got fat," or "Your face is so beautiful. It's too bad you're so heavy." And I heard that over and over and over, that it became my story. Now, fast forward 30 years or so, I'm looking at family pictures. I've got my mother's album. I got it all digitized. I'm looking at pictures and I'm going, wait a minute. There I am at age 12. And yeah, I was probably a size 12, which is a little bit bigger than most girls, but I hadn't had my 12-year-old growth spurt yet. And they were saying that I was fat. And so that became my belief, and that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, trying to undo that has been very difficult over the years. But I started to pay attention to that was somebody else's perception. And now that I'm looking at the pictures, it wasn't true. And that part is where I was like, core beliefs are very powerful in our life.
You've said a few things, and I just want to point them out. In reality, that's a belief. Like, you're about to describe your belief, right? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's a core belief. In reality, I choose to look at the world as if everything's a lesson and everything's an opportunity. I believe that to be true. And that's how I act as a result of that belief. Is it the truth? It's a useful way of looking at things. In neurolinguistic programming, NLP, we call them presuppositions. I like to call them operating beliefs. For instance, behind every behavior is a positive intention. That's a presupposition or operating belief. Is it true? Maybe not. Is it useful? Absolutely. If I go at a country or a person and I think your intention was bad, where am I starting from in negotiation or conversation? But if I go at somebody and say, I know there's something positive here, I just don't see it. Let's figure out what that is. And then we can create a common ground. Now that also goes for the inner voices in your head. We can have conflicting stories. I've gone to workshops to change my beliefs about money, about life, and I've got older beliefs. And those can be conflicting. And sometimes part of the conflicting belief is a younger part of you that was imprinted. And what it means to be imprinted, if you think of a baby animal, they've done studies with ducks, for instance. They hatch from the egg, and the first thing moving that they see, usually it's their mother. But if it's not their mother, they'll follow that thing. And what happens is they are imprinted with the mama duck. So then the baby ducks follow the mother around. They are imprinted. So it's something that locks in your head. We can change those imprints that affect your beliefs, but those internal conflicts often stem from that. And when we consciously choose to change it with the help of somebody else, or doing it, being intentional about it yourself, then you can have a different experience. But often we look at other people and other experiences as if they're wrong, they're bad. But again, the question is it useful? Their beliefs are wrong. Well, what's the intention behind it? What's the fear behind it? What's the story they're telling themselves? And of course, all of you, and I want to just tie this back into our emotions, what we're believing those are the thoughts, create the chemicals in your body that literally feed your cells. You're either in fight or flight mode or health and wellness mode. And there's a lot of complicated science behind it that's more available now through somebody like Bruce Lipton, for instance. The biology of belief is one of the best books, I think, about this subject, because it breaks it down so simply. It talks about complex science and makes it so that you or I or anybody can read it and understand it. And Jeannie, your head, everybody's nodding. I'm going to be quiet.
Ingolf, in the creative process, which everybody, I think, I'm just going to assume everybody wants to be creative, whether it's doing their work or actually being artists or whatever. We like to think we know what we're doing and we're being creative. But in that creative processes you've gone through to get to where you are today, were there people that would say, whoa, hold off, that wasn't good, or things like that, that you overcame because you were practicing, you knew, you could feel it? Is there a point where you had to pull yourself up and say, boom, this is
Well,
me?
this happens all the time. I mean, we are, I think everybody is surrounded by people who have complexes. And I think if you're young, you don't know yet that these people that judge you have much bigger problems themselves. You just take it as, again, your reality when you hear something about your own art, or you're playing, or you as a person. And of course, there were plenty of these, and I think everybody has these. And I wished I would have known, what I know now 20 years ago. But I know if I would turn back time, I would do exactly the same things 20 years ago, because I would be exactly in the same mental state. So and that led me to come here. So that I'm very grateful for that. But this is very important. I think the earlier you realize that. I mean, in the creative process, let's zoom out even more. The more I know, the more I'm questioning. Since we don't know where consciousness really is, it's probably outside of us. Who knows? But definitely is the creative process. I come to understand it more and more like your brain would be an antenna, and you are just receiving things. So you are trying to decode waveforms or whatever it is. And then it depends on your awareness and what you want to reach in order, when you say, okay, stop, that's it, I capture that and work on this. That's as good as I can explain the creative process until now. Maybe I will be better 10 years from now. But I think it's this awareness that you said so good things. So I think this alone, this session of MindPlore, one should just record and listen over and over again, because it can change your mind. That you have to realize that what you create in your own reality is basically forging the way for you in that common, let's say, reality that there are certain things most of the people agree on. That's the reality we live in. But within this reality, your own personal reality creates the path you go through, and you basically can do whatever you want. And this is not just a saying. Yeah.
But when you're talking about creating, you brought up a point for me. We all create, and we don't even realize that. And maybe this should be a topic for another week, because creating is who we are. We come into this world and we create. We begin walking, we begin crawling and creeping and all of that before that, but we create everything we do. And we can't put a separate thought on what we create and what we don't create. But we can decide what makes us happy and what doesn't. Ingolf, if someone had said, Carla, you can sing when I was a little kid, I probably would sing.
For sure.
But my whole family said, no one in this family can sing, so don't sing.
For sure, because most of the people, unless you're disabled, most of the people are musical. And it of course depends on your reality and on your circumstances as to how talented you are or what you can achieve. But humans are innately musical. The first things we do is create via voice and via using our systems that we have built in. So absolutely, yes, you would be singing.
Right.
I'm happy to hear that, because I hold my grandkids and I sing to them, and they're about my granddaughter is now about 6.5 months old, and she's doing this it's a monosyllabic sound, but she does it when I'm singing. So she's going while I'm singing. So I'm saying she sings with me. And my 2-year-old grandson hears a certain commercial it has, basically they made a song out of the name Living Spaces. So he hears living spaces and he says spaces. So, I'm glad to hear that music, because I'm trying to instill that in them.
But the point is, we are always creating.
Yes.
And we need to decide if we want to create singing or if we want to create non-singing. It's our choice.
Well, let me tell you a story. When I was a little girl, I loved singing. And my dad told me I was tone deaf. So he told me to sing outside. And I was crushed. Now, he also sounds like Kermit the Frog, but that's another story. So I went off to boarding school at 13 years old, and I signed up for singing lessons because I wanted to sing lullabies to my babies someday. I walked in to see Caterina Michieli, and she said to me, I said, I'm tone deaf, but I want to sing lullabies to my babies. And she said, Kimi, you're not tone deaf. You've just never been trained. That was mind-blowing for me, because the story that I wasn't able to sing felt like the truth. And then Katerina changed that. And, a number of years later, somebody in one of the mothers at my high school said, oh, you sound ethereal. And I said, what does that mean? She said, look it up. But I was a first soprano and I could, just sing like an angel. But it was training that got me there. Right. And as a child, my mother was a painter, an artist. I wanted to be like my mom. So I painted on one of her canvases and I got in big trouble. My father had a terrible temper, so I don't remember the incident completely, but I imagine it was not good because I did not paint forever. And I did these doodly lines but I did not paint. I'm not an artist. I'm not creative like that. I just picked up paints and I learned that I don't know techniques. So I'm learning techniques. I'm learning how to use the brushes. I'm infused with creativity, but I had no training. And I'm wondering, Ingolf, how many years of training did you have to do your piano?
Well, I'm a bit different than usual people. I started to play the piano only when I was 14 years old. I was so way too late for a professional, actually. But typically,
yeah. Because you are a professional.
Exactly. Typically, I mean, I was surrounded by music, but just for fun. I was playing the violin when I was 7. But just for fun, I was never supposed to be a professional musician. So, and then with 14, some lucky coincidence happened, and a famous piano teacher was seeing me fooling around on the piano, and said to my parents, I have to play the piano. And then I went into it and started practicing 6 hours a day. And 2 years later, I was, or 3 years later, actually, I was playing at Théâtre Champs-Élysées in Paris, Prokofiev concerto.
Wow. Well, that goes to show you, there was a core belief that you were musical, because you started playing the violin much earlier than that, you said.
Yeah.
And, the thing about the story you told, Kimi, is that we let others, when we're young, we don't know that others are putting the kibosh on something.
Well, they're imposing their beliefs on us.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly.
And we now talk a lot about projecting, how somebody projects their own fears and their own liabilities, let's say, onto you. So, if somebody wants to be a writer and they can't be a writer, they're going to tell me I can't write. And I've had bosses tell me that. And it took some doing for me to undo that, the damage, when a boss said, we're going to have a problem because you really can't write. And then I actually went to a professional writing teacher and I showed her my stuff and she said, oh, This is a style issue. You're writing in a journalism style and you're writing hard news, and she wants you to soften it up. And I was like, wish she would have said it that way, you know. And it was many, many years before I tried to write again. But in my job, I had to keep writing. So I wrote smaller things. And then when I got into actually writing white papers and backgrounders, you know, people would say, you know, people who are editing would say, this is really good. I would change this around. You know, that made it much easier. I love having a good editor, but that I had to change the story. And I think that's what we have to do with core beliefs. We have to really look at what is it? You know, am I a heavy set little girl? Not on your life. I'm a vibrant woman, happens to be very healthy and with a great creative mind. That changes the core beliefs. Now, do I live that? I'm still working it, because I think we have to work 5 years longer than all the years. So if it takes you 35 years, you're going to work the next 115 years or whatever it takes, you know, because you're going to keep undoing it and getting better and better and better.
Well,
Kimi, before you say anything, there's someone who needs to leave in 5 minutes, and I want the show to end comfortably. So, and we can take it offline. But because of that, I would like everyone to go around and no more than a minute. I am going to time this and say what they're taking from today's show. And I'm going to start with you, Kimi. And just remember, if you see my phone, that's a warning.
okay. I love the conversation about beliefs. I love opening the door of possibility to people, to helping them see and think that they can change their beliefs too. That is, like, I live for helping spiritual warriors. That would be anybody who's listening to something like this or wanting to make the world a better place. I live for helping spiritual warriors live their dreams and shine their light to the world. So any opportunity I have to help uplift that conversation so that a new person listening to this or somebody who's been listening for years says, oh, I can become the channel for creativity to flow through me. I can be, and I wanted to say this earlier, like Nikola Tesla. He believed that the channel came through him. I can do that. And if one person gets that, that will have made my day.
And I think that's what we all want, and we're growing towards that. Ingolf?
Well, I mean, you know, we established that core beliefs change your personal reality. And this reality, your personal reality, forges the path that will shape your experience. And with this, basically all of your cells every day as you wish. And so your core beliefs shape who you become and what your life's going to be. So seriously important.
Yeah.
Excellent. Jeanne?
I like the idea that we can actually crystallize what we think our core beliefs are, and we can clean that up through editing the stories that we keep repeating to ourselves, you know, by asking, you know, is it true? Is it useful? And finding what our true self is and knowing that it's simply put, we are love.
And that's it. If you think about our lives, even how we came into the world through love. And we'll go out of the world through love. But we forget that love is our existence. It's not an emotion. Which Sri Ravi Shankar's one of my favorite quotes from Sri Ravi Shankar of the Art of Living Foundation. Having said that, because we are very limited right now, I need to end the show, but I want to remind you that we will be back on. We had a really powerful panel today, and we have an extremely powerful panel on Thursday. We have Neville Gaunt and Cameron Risby. And come and watch. And remember, when you're watching on YouTube, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, and comment. Let us know. It'll help us grow on YouTube. Did I forget anything, Jeanne, before I?
An invitation to visit the Patreon page, Giggle Lady. Carla has a Patreon page to help support all the shows that she's working on. And she has a raffle going for anybody who donates $5 or more. She goes in and picks out the names of the donors, and one will receive a half-hour session with Carla online. It's a very powerful session. And you know, if you haven't figured out, she's a really good interviewer. She'll pull out great pearls of wisdom from you. So please visit Patreon, and it's Giggle Lady.
And donations are $5 a month for a year. If you just do one donation, that doesn't put you in the raffle. It's how we have it set up. With that, I am so happy we did this today. We are going to wave goodbye. And as I said, we'll be back with an excellent conversation again on Thursday.
Yay.
And